I'd like to take a moment to thank you all for the incredible support as of late. I know I've been very inconsistent. That is because my time has been dedicated to other things as of right now, but I do appreciate it. We are almost at 10,000 subscribers, and at the time of uploading this video, I might just be at 10,000 subscribers. Wow. I'll talk about that in another video, but wow. Berserk obviously has so many incredible moments. That's why Berserk is what it is today, but there are in Berserk many different backstories. Now some of them are shorter, some of them are longer. We have an entire arc that is a backstory in the Golden Age arc, deemed one of the best arcs in all of manga, and for sure one of the best in Berserk. And then we have much smaller backstories, like the one I'm going to be talking about in this video, being the Spring Flower of Distant Days, which spans a measly 3 chapters. How can a backstory that lasts 3 chapters be so impactful, especially at a point in the story where things are going completely differently and where the backstory kind of has nothing to do with the current plot at the moment? Of course, I think we can all agree that the best backstory in Berserk was the Golden Age, but when we take a look at the Spring Flower of Distant Days, I think there are many beautiful things we can take away from it, and there's much more deep meaning to this backstory. And I think there is a much bigger reason as to why Miura decided to include it at such a random moment in the story. Some people go as far as to say that this is filler. I, of course, strongly disagree with that. I think many people also strongly disagree with that because that statement in itself, I don't think I need to evaluate on it. Now, this backstory is the first time we really get to see the upgraded artwork of the Fantasia arc actually fleshed out in a previous setting. We get to see Guts, young Guts in the new art style, and many old characters in the new art style, and what I really like the most, the military theme to the story in the new art style, which just looked incredible. But aside from the artwork, there's much more impactful things to be discussing about these 3 chapters, which is pretty much what makes them so good. There's a lot of nostalgia to go with these chapters, as seeing young, agitated Guts once again is much different from what we've been experiencing in the Fantasia arc and the Millennium Falcon arc before it, and we get introduced to the most important character in this mini arc, Chich, who is just a little fairy. And despite not having anything to do with the story until this point, Chich's introduction and involvement in these 3 chapters becomes so emotionally impactful. Now that may be because Chich is a cute figure, and cute figures tend to drive more emotional impact in the readers, and that's pretty obvious, as I think a lot of us felt for Chich when she eventually died. And I think this is also why Guts felt such an immediate connection to Chich, but it does go much deeper than that. Chich is a mirror image of Guts' childhood. Young Guts completely reflects Chich, and Chich does the same for Guts. They're absolutely mirror images of each other. They can pretty much represent each other flawlessly. And it shows in these chapters as Miura depicts Chich's upbringing very similarly to Guts's, being a very dark, lonely place, fearing the darkness of the night, looking up in the night at the stars, fearing something happening to you, not knowing what's going to happen, fear of the unknown, and so on. It's pretty obvious to see that these 2 characters have a lot in common. It's just that Chich sort of resembles that child, that inner child in Guts, much more explicitly in the way that she speaks and presents herself. Chich wants to be of use to someone. She wants to help someone out because, after all, Guts is the first person that actually recognizes and acknowledges Chich's presence in that dark cave. All the other people didn't actually recognize her at all, which is very similar to how Guts was as a child. Nobody really acknowledged his presence, nobody really cared about him. Even his father figure Gambino, as we know, sold him out to Donovan. So even the man that Guts thought he was the closest with actually did not care at all about him. And yet the first, I guess, person, was probably better to say creature, that actually acknowledges Guts for who he is Chich. It's not some other human, it's not anyone he meets on the street. And before meeting Chich, Guts does encounter another person that was at the time going to be seemingly nice to him. But of course, Martino, as we know, betrayed Guts, and that is a beautiful parallel with Gambino's whole idea of not trusting other people. Despite just being betrayed, despite being told by his father figure which is an extremely powerful message from a very powerful person. Not to trust the people that are around you. Guts immediately trusts Chich, and that is again because they are mirror images of each other, and Guts sort of recognizes this himself as he says, "This hallucination represents my inner child." Chich is sort of like Guts' weakness, and because Guts sees himself in Chich, I think this is why he really decides to go along and trust her. This is why he develops a connection with her, and this is why he sort of gets to actually talk to someone for the first time, which is so sad to think about considering he's probably in his mid-teens at this point. And these two characters open up to each other so beautifully. It's sort of like the Wounds chapters, which are some of the best chapters in all of Berserk, where Guts and Casca open up to each other, except this is the first time Guts really becomes comfortable and relaxed being with someone else. This is also the first time Guts willingly decides to help someone. Before this, every action has been for his own survival and for his own good, whether he willingly swung his sword or not. But in these moments, he decides to help Chich out. He decides to return the favor to Chich for her favor of healing him. If it was someone like Gambino or Martino, who knows if Guts would have returned the favor, but because it was someone as innocent as Chich and someone as passionate and compassionate as Chich, Guts decides that it wouldn't be harmful to return the favor. In fact, it's something he is sort of obligated to do. After all, this is the first person who's really actually helped him and considered him. Up until this point, he'd only acted out of his own interest, and this is the first time he really does something that isn't for himself, but is a favor for another person. Just through this small exchange between what could have honestly been a hallucination, Guts opens up. Now this moment is extremely sad, and it's the moment where Chich passes away by accident. Because of the passion she shows for helping Guts, she unfortunately uses up all of her leaves and ends up dying. Now, there is a debate, I think, still going on as to whether Chich is a hallucination, I should say was a hallucination, or was an actual elf, but that's besides the point, because when Guts wakes up, Chich is nowhere to be seen. She could have been a hallucination, or she could have been a real elf. In my personal opinion, I do think she was real. There may be much more depth to that, but that's neither here nor there. As I mentioned at the beginning of the video, the death of Chich is so impactful because of her innocence and compassion to Guts, and as we know, Guts had never felt this in his life. Feeling this for the first time now only increases that emotional impact even more. And what's absolutely beautiful that finishes Guts' character in this little mini arc off perfectly is the fact that he actually goes and lets the flower go to where the other flowers are. He returned the favor that he promised Chich he would return, despite the fact that she might have been dead. Now this is some compassion that Guts has shown for the first time ever. And it shows that even the darkest and most seemingly evil person can really have a side that is warm and caring. Now Guts isn't an evil person at this point, but he's an extremely broken person. He's emotionally unstable and he doesn't trust anyone. But with the right exchange of dialogue, with the right exchange of emotions, even someone like young Guts in these chapters can open up to the mirror image of himself. And I think this is why the Spring Flower of Distant Days is one of the most beautiful parts in all of Berserk. It shows a lost, broken character seeing a mirror image of his childhood self and sympathizing with that childhood self, going as far as to believe in a hallucination, something he would not have otherwise ever done, and returning the favor for the first time in his entire life. A huge character change for Guts. Once again, I appreciate the incredible support in the recent videos, and I thank you for watching this video to the end. Have an incredible day, and peace.